Welcome, brethren, once again to part 2 of the End Time Events Timeline. In part 1, we showed the study guides that we're going to use to go into the timeline, and part 2, we're going to start to get into that timeline. So before you begin, as we always request, kneel and pray for the promise of John 16:13, where the Lord says that he will send us the Spirit of truth, and he shall guide us into all truth. So let's begin. All right, so the study verses on this presentation is number 1 at track 3, and that's page 100. Perhaps foremost among the multitudes are snared while doing all they can to run away from inspired interpretations of the scriptures are the extremists, of whom there are at least 2 classes. One with the tendency to literalize, the other with the tendency to spiritualize. These two will go just as far in their opposite directions in their understanding and explaining the scriptures as their opposite temperaments impel them. And the second quote, we have 2 symbolic code number 78, page 10. Those who desire to know the truth must carefully mark every word, otherwise they will never comprehend the truth, and as a consequence, they will be driven by the winds as the waves of the sea until the winds cease blowing, probation closes, and they will be left to sink down in their sins as do the waves in the sea. And that's again 2 symbolic code number 78, page 10. So we like these verses. We think they're very pertinent to the study that we're going to do. When we break down the timeline, we certainly don't want to go too far and literalize everything, but in the same token, we don't want to try to spiritualize things away either. So we want to keep a happy medium here. And like the Rod message always tells us, stay in the middle of the road. And the second one is, as we went over in part 1, the words are very important. And if we skip over a word, we are going into possibly a wrong path. We're going to see things foreignly than we should see them, as inspiration intends them to be. So these are good references. All right, so we're going to cut to the chase and let the people know how the timeline is in the general nutshell. Number 1 is the first big event to come is going to be the gigantic world war over Middle East. Number 2, during that war, the Ezekiel 9 church judgment comes. Number 3, Michael stands up to deliver the 144,000. The time of trouble begins. Number 4, the 144,000 quickly begin their travel back to the promised land, and that's via land. Okay, we keep that in mind. There's some teachings that are propagated among present truth believers saying, oh, we're going to be zoomed away in a chariot and arrive there in a matter of minutes. So we'll go into that. Number 5, the world Sunday churches begin their church federation. Now that comes the next event after number 4. Number 6, the 144,000 along with others begin to rebuild the kingdom to receive the great multitude. Number 7, the false prophet appears in the USA and begins his miracle work. Sunday worship is advocated. Number 8, the 144,000 are sent out to the nations to proclaim the final gospel, Sabbath as God's day. So that's going to be the final message, is that you've got to worship the Lord on his holy day. Stop going to this ridiculous Sunday worship stuff and get with the Lord. Get right with the Lord. That'll be the final gospel, and come back into the kingdom. Number 9, the Sunday law is set up in the USA. Then, very soon after, goes worldwide. Death decree enforced. Number 10, great multitude are called out into the kingdom by the 144,000. Number 11, probation closes for humanity. Number 12, the 7 last plagues come. And number 13, Christ comes in the cloud, takes the redeemed back to heaven. So we're going to start out with the nutshell timeline of events. And then we're going to break each one down and go into the references and the reasons why these events happen the way they do. All right, so number 1 and number 2, gigantic war and church purification. The reference here is track 14, page 22. And we'll go ahead and pause. You can go ahead and read this one. Okay, so let's make a note here that Ezekiel 9 church purification comes during the war. We're not told specifically whether at the beginning, middle, or end of it. We must leave it there as to timing. So let's make sure to understand that there's nothing here that indicates the time or length of that war or when in that war the church purification comes. All we can go by is the general outline that it's going to happen during the war, and we will know more as it happens, God willing. All right, so the question is, where will this gigantic war be, and how long will it be? And of course, you could read these. We'll pause. Okay, so we see here that it's going to be in the Middle East, particularly Jerusalem, and that it's going to be, like we say, we don't know how long it's going to be. With the big warheads today, you know, you got the nuclear warheads, and you've got the atomic bombs, and you got all these big warheads. If a couple of those land, I don't think that this war is going to last too long. You know, you can't foresee lots of big bombs landing for a long time, right? So my thinking on this is that it can't be a real long, dragged out war because of the weapons that are going to be used. Most likely, you know, either Israel or Iran or somebody's going to let off some big warheads, and it's going to cause the other nations to get involved. And but you're going to see a firestorm, and probably it's going to happen in a fairly short period of time. But yet, we'll have to wait and see on this one. All right, number 3, Michael standing up to deliver. There are many references according to the Rod Index that speak of Daniel 12:1, and they provide 2 main descriptions and context of deliverance. Number 1, deliverance of the 144,000 from sin and sinners, tares in the church. Number 2, deliverance of the great multitude from the Sunday law. So let's keep in mind, Daniel 12:1 speaks of 2 different types of deliverances, and we've got to keep that in mind when we look at the first deliverance, because some say that the Daniel 12:1 is speaking only of delivering from the Sunday law. Well, that's not true. It speaks, according to these references, of a deliverance of the saints from sin and sinners in the church. Okay, Daniel 12:1, we know that one. And the comment is made, by delivering the righteous, he thoroughly separates the righteous from among the wicked. He puts the good fish in the vessels and casts out the bad. Matthew 13:48. He shall cleanse his people from sin and sinners. 2TG number 33, page 1011. Then we have this other quote. It says, thus we see plainly that the redeemed from the church, the servants of God, the first fruits or firstborn, the biblical term for priesthood or ministry, stand firmly during the shaking in the midst of the land, with the result that they will carry the truth to all nations during the shaking in the world, thereby taking salvation to many. These two classes of livings are necessarily, therefore, the only redeemed who are left after the shaking. They are spared, delivered from the destruction, because their names are found written in the book, Daniel 12:1. So we see that, again, the good fish are separated, and this is the deliverance from the sin and sinners in the church. All right, we have more quotes. The second one is found in 7 symbolic code number 712, page 19. As seen from Malachi 4:5, the great and dreadful day of the Lord comes the result of the proclamation of the message of Elijah the prophet. Thus, rather than being Christ's second appearing, is obviously, on the one hand, his setting his seal upon the forehead of the righteous, Revelation 14:1 and 7:9, and bringing his judgments, the wrath of the Lamb, upon the wicked, Revelation 6:15 and 17. And on the other hand, Satan's warring against the remnant, Revelation 12:17. This conflict between God and Satan brings in the time of trouble such as never was. At the beginning, let me repeat that, at the beginning of which Michael stands to deliver everyone that should be found written in the book, Daniel 12:1. It is the great and dreadful day of the Lord, great for the righteous, dreadful for the wicked. Once it begins, it continues, as the Spirit of Prophecy says, without respite to the end, Christ's second appearing. See Testimonies to Ministers, page 182. So we note that Michael stands up at the beginning of the time of trouble to deliver all found written in the book. Well, we know the first ones found written in the book is after Ezekiel 9, and that's the 144,000. So at that time, he begins the deliverance, and that is the 144,000. The first found written are the 144,000 and are delivered from sin and sinners, terrors. The great multitude will then be delivered next. All right, so when we go back to 1 and 2, we can see that this, and 3, we can see that this chart perfectly aligns with those events. We have the, right here, we have the Ezekiel 9 church judgment. Also, we have the war. And then we also have Michael standing up. So in this chart, we have to understand that this area right here encompasses the first 3 big events, the first 3 happenings of the timeline of events right here. Okay, so we'll keep referring back to this chart because, like I said, we want to make sure to harmonize, harmonize with this chart. It's very important. All right, number 4. The 144,000 quickly began their travel back to the land, back by land to the promised land. All right, we'll go ahead and pause. You can read this. All right, so we see very clearly that in the day that the war is happening and the Lord's feet comes down in the valley there, that the saints are heading back to the kingdom. So it's not before or after, but in this time that it shows that they're starting to make their headway back to the Holy Land. They have witnessed the great slaughter of the church. They know their cue is now been set before them to their marching orders to go forward. And so apparently it looks like there's not much of a delay at this point to go forward. And excuse me, brother, got email coming in. But yeah, so this is very clear that in the time of the war, they are heading back to the kingdom. And so this gives us a great clue about the quickness that the saints are ready to go. And in other words, it seems to me that there's not going to be a lot of delay and we're going to sit here and watch everything shake out in the war. I think that the angels are going to let us know, hey, you've been chosen, you know your job, you know present truth, you know what to do. Why are you delaying? And I think we're going to have to get going here, God willing. Okay, in that day, and what day? In the day all nations gather against Jerusalem, that is, and that now is, and bring its fall from Gentile rule. In that day the Lord's feet shall stand upon Mount of Olives. The Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof towards the east and towards the west, and there shall be a very great valley, and half the mountain shall remove toward the north, half of it towards the south. Zechariah 14:4. The Lord's post-millennial coming, too, shall be similar to this. See earlier writings, page 51 to 52. The servants of God shall then flee to the valley of the mountains, where the Lord's feet shall stand, and all the saints with him. That is, the Lord's feet will open the way for the restoration of the kingdom and for the gathering of the people into it. 2TG number 31, page 6 and 7. Now we see that this event, the Lord standing on the mount and the saints fleeing to the valley, is not only premillennial, but even pre-probationary, and that it commences the reestablishment of the house of Judah, that it prepares the way for the lightening of the earth with the glory of the angel, Revelation 18:1, that is eventually to bring the end of sinners, 1TG number 20, page 14. Now, we have to be honest and frank here. When we read this last reference, our eyes were popping out of our head. We were amazed that we found this. And, it's just like anything. We always say, guide us into all truth, Lord. And he guides us even in the secret parts of our mind and understanding that we need something, right? We need to know answers here. And this was beautiful because we learned that this standing on the mount and the saints fleeing is, we already know, premillennial. But look at this, pre-probationary. The Lord standing on the mount and the saints fleeing is an event happening together. This is pre-probationary. The testing has not even come yet. So probation, as we know in the dictionary, means a testing, a watching period. In other words, there's going to be put forth a test. Well, these events are not even a time yet where the brethren are tested. The great multitude are tested. So this shows the earliness of this event and how quickly this is going to happen prior to the loud cry. This is even prior to probationary time. All right, now we see that this event, the Lord standing on the mountain, saints fleeing to the valley, is not only premillennial, but even pre-probationary, that it commences the reestablish of the house of Judah, prepares the way for the lightening of the earth with the glory of the angel, Revelation 18:1, and that is eventually to bring in the end of sinners, 1TG number 20, page 14. So we want to bring this up because now we'll look at the chart and we'll see this again goes perfectly towards the understanding of the end time events, because we notice that when the saints get back and they flee and they stand with the Lamb, what does this do? It commences the reestablishment of the house of Judah. And it's also pre-probationary. So we see that, again, while these Federation churches are doing their dastardly work and coming together, what are the saints doing? Are they just sitting around waiting? No. They're getting prepared with the Lamb on Mount Zion, and they're also beginning the commencement of the reestablishment of the house of Judah, the house of David. So this is beautiful and all in perfect harmony. All right, how will this fleeing take place? By land or chariot? Now this is the issue that we talked about at the beginning. Let us remember the time of Jacob's trouble in fundamental beliefs. So when we read number 7, we see that subsequently, the time of Jacob's trouble, Jeremiah 37, for the 144,000, the sons of Jacob, logically develops on their way home, Genesis 32, 1 and 24, to the land of their fathers, Ezekiel 36, 28, 37, 21, and 25. This can be found in Fundamental Tract, page 13. So we note that number 1, this Jacob's time of trouble is to occur on their way home. That's the first point. The second point, it develops on their way. So it's a developing, just like the first type where Jacob led his flock on that journey back home. It was the development of the Jacob's time of trouble. It just didn't happen in one day. It took time, and as he got to a certain point on his travel, then it happened. So it's going to be the same way in antitype. Now, the question would come at this point, can be zoomed over in a chariot fulfill those statements? We must be logical thinkers and close reasoners in this point. In the days of Moses, the Lord smote but one stream, the Red Sea, and one nation, Egypt. But now the Lord promises to smite every stream, all seven, and causes people from the four corners of the earth to reach their land without so much as getting their feet wet. Although today, as in Moses' day, such a thing seems utterly impossible, yet it is certain that just as God made it possible then, he will now too. The battle is the Lord's, the will is ours. We have nothing to do but to obey his voice. This is our only duty, brother and sister. 1TG, number 31, page 7 and 8. So, again, we go back to the fact that it's illogical. And remember, we're counseled to be logical thinkers and close reasoners. So if we start reasoning this, we start logically thinking about this, how is this going to happen if you have a zooming of a chariot from whatever place you are in the world to the Holy Land? How can you have the time of Jacob's trouble on that way in the zooming chariot? Is it going to be because there's going to be other chariots coming against our chariot? No, brother. This is complete fantasy land. If you start thinking about the ridiculousness of this happening in a chariot. So we have to be, again, logical thinkers and close reasoners. Now, we do have in the description box some videos that we did on the travel to the kingdom. We go into this in more detail so that you can understand this topic a little better. And we have more quotes. The Lord shall utterly destroy the tongue of Egypt, Egyptian sea world, and with his mighty wind shall shake his hand over the river, and shall smite it in the seven streams, and make men go over dry shod. And there shall be a highway for the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, like it was to Israel in the day that he came up out of the land of Egypt. Isaiah 11, 10-16. Very evidently, then, the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night that so gloriously led Hebrew host out of Egypt foreshadowed an even greater and more glorious protective covering, victoriously leading Israel of today not only on their way to the land of promise, but all the while they are there. Shepherd's Rod Tract, page 54. From Isaiah 11, we see that the Lord has set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, Isaiah 11:11, and that when he does so, he will prepare a way for them, like as it was to Israel in the day that he come out of the land of Egypt, Isaiah 11:16, and that quote is found in One Answer, page 25. So we ask the question, how was it like unto the day when he came out of the land of Egypt? Would the Lord miraculously pick up all the people and zoom them over to the promised land? No, he guided them and led them physically across the land. That was how it was as the day he came out of Egypt. Out of Egypt into Israel, right? So this is what the word of the Lord is saying. He will prepare a way for them in the same manner. And also we'll see that there's going to be a protective covering, just like it was in the day of Israel. This will be beautiful because the saints, as they travel, are going to be protected by this glorious light. And so this is all going to be a fantastic thing. And I think that it's important to remember that this is all the beginning of the power of the Lord, right? This is all the signs. Because Ezekiel 9 has happened, they've seen his anger. Now they're going to see his glory. And this is a glory sign. One of the first signs that's going to be shown. The rivers are going to be, cleared out. The sea will be cleared out. Anything that's body of water will be cleared out. And the world's going to be stunned at what they see. Of course, the devil's going to come in and try to change all these miracles for his benefit, But we as Present Truth believers know that this is going to be glorious. And the world, the honest of heart, will see this glory coming from the Lord. According to Scripture, Jew and Arab alike are to go out of the promised land and the meek of the earth to march into it. How are they to get there, and who is to open the way? The answer to these questions we shall find in Zechariah 14:4-5. And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof towards the east and towards the west. And there shall be a very great valley, and half the mountain shall remove towards the north, and half it towards the south. And ye shall flee to the valley of the mountains, for the valley of the mountains shall reach unto Azael. Yeah, ye shall flee, like as ye fled from before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. And the Lord my God shall come, and all the saints with thee. 2TG number 41, page 13 and 14. The Lord himself, you see, is to open the way for the returning of his people. And again, it quotes Isaiah 11 to 12, 11 and verse 11 and 12 and 16. And again, brethren, you can see it's going to be like it was in Egypt. So why we like this quote, and this is something to remember, is this is the only place in the rod that asks the question, how are they to get there? Now, do you see anywhere of the answer? They're going to be there by zooming, by a chariot. No, you don't. You see the perfect answer that the Lord, in all his weight of evidence in the rod message, tells us, by land. Okay, so this is beautiful, and this is something we want to remind the brethren. Don't be fooled by these presentators that are trying to trick us into saying, oh, don't worry about getting over the kingdom. You'll be zoomed over in a chariot. No, that's not what the rod teaches. All right, brethren, so this concludes part 2. And next week we're going to go into the next event. The World Sunday Churches begin their church federation. So we'll start to discuss the next events, the church federation, the prophet coming together, and the two-horned beast domain, the scarlet-colored beast the woman riding the scarlet-colored beast, and so forth and so on. So we'll probably make this series, I think, probably at least 3 or 4. And then hopefully you'll be able to see a clear picture of end-time events based on the message. So this concludes the part 2, and until next time, may the Lord continue to guide you into all truth. Amen.